My name is Tyler. I'm creator of The Costume Shop, a horror comedy about a boy who works at a haunted Halloween store. And this is Creating Comics Weekly. I'm putting together this series of videos because right now I'm running a Kickstarter campaign that's going to run for the next month until April 6th. And I wanted to keep my backers updated on what it's like creating comics for both the web and then transferring them to print, as well as the entire process of putting together a book version of my comic. I'll also give some insight into the world of comic making for those who are getting started or those who could use some tips or suggestions. This should definitely help. So, I want to talk first about this comic and how it came to be. Because ideas can come from everywhere, especially inspiration. When I was creating this story, it actually started off as a roleplay session between me and a friend online known as Hawkenstein. A roleplay is when we each played a different character, and we would take turns sending parts of a story back to each other. So one of us would write a short paragraph like, this character walked down the street, then they would follow up with, that character was also walking with that person. So you're sort of like collaboratively telling a story, which is a really interesting way to do the costume shop. So it started off as this role play. We would each take turns playing characters. In the story of the costume shop, I was an anthropomorphic lion called Jace, and they were an anthropomorphic bird known as Rion. And basically what we collaborated together was the entire first chapter of the costume shop, save for the ending, which was written to be able to set up future chapters. So we would each take turns playing the characters, we would each take turns playing the costumes that would try and attack the characters, as well as Franklin, who was at that time just some random skeleton shop owner. And it was really fun because we could be as creative as we wanted to, we can share ideas with each other, and it was a really interesting time. A couple years later, I was working on two different comics, Scribbles, which was my slice of life, just a gag a week kind of comic, and then Drawn Out, which was a comic that I started as a project for school, but then I decided to continue after a couple people online seemed to really enjoy it. At that time, I didn't really have a story written out for that. I was just sort of going as I kept drawing these pages, which wasn't the best idea. I'll get into that when I talk about writing for your comic. But those comics were taking forever because I was drawing them and then I was inking them digitally, and at that time I didn't have a tablet. I was actually using a mouse to click the points and then apply a fake set of stroke to it to make it look like I was using an actual pen or a tablet for inking. And they were taking forever. And I wanted to work on something that I can make easily and get finished quickly. And that's where I looked back at this story that we had done, me and Hawkenstein, and the premise of it being a full comic or a full 30-page story. Because essentially what we had written was the entire storyline, as well as all the descriptions of what the characters were seeing, what they were doing, any dialogue, and it seemed like a fun idea. They had disappeared online, which was a little bit unnerving, because I'm not sure what happened to them, but I followed up with them all the time, and I'm like, can I do this as a comic? Do you think that would be okay? Eventually, when I didn't hear back from them for close to 6 or 7 months, I decided to work on the comic anyways, and I changed a lot of the key things in it. So Jace became Finn, and he became a human character, and Rian became Ryan, who was also a human, because it was more exciting for humans and the juxtaposition of these costume monsters instead of anthros or furries, as the internet would call it. So, because the story was already written, all I had to do then was storyboard it and put it to paper. And that's sort of where the basic premise for the story came to be. It was something that was written but never completely made, and we just tried to do something fun with it. Eventually they did come back online, and they were really excited to see that the comic took off and people were enjoying it. They're actually one of the artists that's in this Season 1 book that's currently on Kickstarter. So I'm really happy to see that they're want to work together on this comic and keep following up with these characters in the project. So that's really awesome. When it comes to inspiration, a lot of the times I go to the books that I read as a kid, or specifically the ones that I read when I started making comics. With the costume shop, it covers a lot of, how do I say, themes that some may see as not safe for work or inappropriate, but to those who are reading it, normally they could still enjoy the story. It's when it goes into the bonus comics is where it gets into a little bit of explicit content, but a lot of that came from the books that I was reading as a kid, specifically the Goosebumps books. A lot of them would always have crazy monsters that would always be like eating kids, like Shocker on Shock Street, which was about a theme park where all the monsters are actually alive. That one was a huge inspiration to me. There's also a scene where there's like mud monsters and quicksand and shit, and I'm like, as a kid I was fascinated by that. I mean, most kids get creeped out, but then as you grow up, like, you start to realize that that thing that scares you is a little bit fascinating, and you start to like it, which is kind of why we enjoy horror movies so much, I think. As a kid, horror movies scare the crap out of you, and then as you get older, you're like, you know what, I actually really enjoy this for some reason. I like getting scared. I like seeing gross shit, because most of the time you don't ever get to see that as a kid. Another one, the biggest one specifically, is Monster Blood, which I'm so happy I have this original copy. Mostly because this has a giant slime monster, and I really love drawing that kind of stuff in the comics. It was a big thing when I was drawing the comic Drawn Out. I had this big goo monster made out of green slime, and all the comments were like, this is like Monster Blood. That cover's missing since I moved, but these are all the original copies when Goosebumps came out. So right now, this project is on Kickstarter, because for the past 3 years I've been working on this comic. It now has 4 chapters and over 120 pages, and I've had some fantastic artists and friends who have done guest comics or commissions of these characters and this universe. So the Kickstarter is to fund this book. This is just a proof copy of what the actual print is going to be, so the pages are not completely laid out, the colors may not be completely accurate, but for those of you who don't know, a proof is the best possible version of a comic book. No, it's actually a test copy that I got printed to show off to backers what it's going to look like. It has over 150 pages, including the 120 pages of the comics and then about 40 or so pages of bonus comics, some of which are going to be added in through the Kickstarter. So if you want to see this comic come to life, if you want to help add a bunch more extra pages to it, and even get to vote on which characters or what kind of story or plot elements will be in other comics that'll get added through stretch goals, be sure to back it right now at kickstarter.costumeshopcomic.com. If you have any questions on the book recommendations, feel free to message me anytime. And let's start a conversation here. I'm going to be doing a video every single week, if I can, during this campaign, about what it's like creating comics. So if you have a project that you're working on, do this. Film a video of what your project is and how it's going, and tell people about the story. Use the title Creating Comics Weekly and try and film 4 videos in 1 month. That's 1 video a week, which should be pretty easy to do. If you have a camera, throw it up. If you have a cell phone, even just hold it like this. Talk about your comic, get the word out there, and most of all, share what you are doing. Because if you love doing it, if you're passionate, keep making comics. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Tyler, this is Creating Comics Weekly, and I'll see you next week.